Washington, D.C., like most major cities in America dominated by Democrat leadership, is undergoing a huge upswing in crime, violent crime. And the District Council's response has been to actually reduce penalties for carjacking and assaults and put criminals back out on the streets because actually nobody can answer that question. I have no idea what they're thinking, but it's actually brought the guardian angels back to the streets, patrolling the metro, because the cops aren't getting any support from the leadership. It's a mess in Washington, and it's time for Congress to use their oversight powers to actually fix the problem. Joining us right now to discuss that and many other problems in the district, Vince Coglianese. He, of course, the afternoon drive host on WMAL, my radio station, as well my colleague. Vince, thanks for joining us.
Larry, good to see you.
It really has gotten that bad. This isn't getting the kind of national attention that crime in New York or Chicago gets, but D.C. is breaking records right now, isn't it?
Yeah, D.C. is out of control, and I hate looking because every time I do, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're on another record pace for homicides, for instance, and carjackings completely out of control. And so crime is really center stage for anyone who lives in the district. And it's not just the so-called rough areas of Washington, D.C. It seems like every major American city run by Democrats have always had a rough area. It's everywhere. It's in the nice areas. We see shootings in places like Georgetown. We see shootings in downtown Washington, D.C. Carjackings have become routine. Outside of the major ballparks, we've seen this. And it's just, it's spread everywhere, and it's led to a couple things. One, it's led to a lot of people leaving Washington, D.C. They've decided they don't want to live in the nation's capital anymore. It's led to shock by tourists who come not just in the United States to their own capital, but by international tourists. I spoke with a tour guide recently on my program saying that when international tourists arrive in D.C., they can't believe the sights that they encounter, to include the homelessness that's everywhere, and that these beautiful sights are looking more and more like they're inside of a third world country. It's a terrible trend, and boy, something has to change.
Yeah, I agree. And it's gotten so bad. You mentioned the nice areas, the rich areas. There was just a crime the other morning in what they call the 14th Street corridor, which is a recently gentrified neighborhood. And I say that in a good way. Certain neighborhoods should get gentrified. A brick was thrown through the front window of a Lululemon, and they stole about $4,000 worth of yoga pants. I'm just wondering if that'll be the difference maker. Carjackings, yeah, deaths, murder down in Southeast DC, that's one thing. But you go after our yoga pants, and now all your Northwest liberals, they're going to get upset.
Yeah, finally, maybe this will be the thing that breaks the back of crime in Washington, D.C. I'm not holding my breath. I did see another crime that took place in just the last 24 hours or so. There was an attempted robbery. A bunch of guys all jumped out of a Lexus SUV wearing, they say, fake CIA jackets. They have uniforms now. They're dressing up in costumes as they assault people. It's amazing. And to your first point about the guardian angels coming back, and in Washington, D.C., you know, under different circumstances, under a more, quote, normal time, I'd be saying, man, this really shouldn't be up to private citizens to have to keep the peace. But what other options do D.C. residents have? You've got guys now who say that, look, we're going to ride the metro. We're going to keep an eye on things. We're going to try and keep people safe. We're going to call the cops when necessary. We'll intervene to try and de-escalate. That's a dangerous thing to do, especially in a city with so much violence.
Yeah.
But what else can we do? I mean, the lawlessness is definitely everywhere, and it's definitely on the metro. Well, if you just go to a metro station, just watch the people who do not pay to get on the train.
Right.
The fare jumping is out of control.
And there was a recent District Council initiative a couple of years ago that said they were going to decriminalize those activities. So basically allowing criminals to ride without any penalty. And of course, that entices a criminal element. Yeah. The snide voice of the Washington Post Metro section would suggest that the problem now is the guardian angels. These are unarmed volunteers who just want to keep the streets safe and be a presence, as you said, an extra set of eyes. And they're the problem. I mean, when the police are not allowed to enforce the law, and when the district attorney doesn't actually prosecute the law, even if the cops do bring someone in, that's going to bring the community out. It invites vigilantism.
No question. And when you destroy the morale of the police department in Washington, D.C., and this is a story that can be transposed to any city in America where this is occurring, when you destroy the morale of the cops, they leave. And so D.C. has thousands fewer cops right now than it did just a few years ago. And there is a direct relationship in the troop strength and the force strength of the cops and the amount of crime that's now happening in the city. And a few D.C. officials are willing to say that out loud. Occasionally, Mayor Bowser admits that. People like Vincent Gray, a council member, says that. But the reality is they're not being forceful enough, standing up for cops, trying to bring the morale up, trying to bring the numbers up, and getting people on the street who can actually protect this city. And so as a result, private citizens are taking it upon themselves.
Well, Mayor Bowser likes to grandstand, and she vetoed a move to defund the police, and she vetoed the decriminalization or the lowering of penalties for some things. But she's also the woman who oversaw painting Black Lives Matters in the middle of the street right after we saw riots and looting in June of 2020. And Black Lives Matter, I'm sorry, that's code word. That's a dog whistle for defund the police.
Yes. She stoked that movement. She stoked an effort to enable criminalization, criminal elements for sure, and to attack the morale of police forces and suggest they are the bad guys in every equation. That was a very stupid move on her part, and she's never walked away from it. It's still painted on the street.
Yep.
The place is still called Black Lives Matter Court or whatever they're calling it, right in front of the White House. It's disgraceful because the city's collapsing. If Black Lives mattered, you would be working to increase the security of the city where they live.
Yeah.
And that is not what is happening. And so it's a scam. And boy, it's so frustrating to see it happen to this city that both you and I know and love.
Vince, you point out that this story could be told in Chicago and in Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Baltimore. You're right. The difference here in Washington, D.C. is constitutionally, there is oversight here in the House of Representatives. When people from Montana want to come to the nation's capital and petition their government by meeting with their representative, they have the right as a citizen to not have to look over their shoulder and see if they're going to get shivved on their way to the Capitol.
Yeah.
Is Congress actually going to exercise that oversight and actually start overruling some of these moves that we're seeing from the District Council?
They need to. Republicans now in the leadership have begun this process. They just voted recently, for instance, to overturn this rule, weakening penalties for criminals in Washington, D.C. This is Congress's ability. Some time ago, they established something called D.C. Home Rule, and they allowed Washington, D.C. to have a mayor, to have a city council, to try and manage their own affairs. But that has been a disaster. That is clearly a disaster. And fundamentally, the founders set this up not to have a different state, not to have a unique state in the union. This is the nation's capital. It is the nation's business. The entire country has a vested interest in the performance of the capital. So as a result, Congress has authority, ultimate authority over how the district conducts its affairs, and they should exercise it. The problem here is this. You need cooperation from the Democrats in the Senate. They refuse to give it. You need cooperation from the president. He refuses to give it. And it's a real tragedy that continues to befall Washington, D.C. Congress should really step in.
Democrats will argue, and this is their argument. They're going to say, oh, you Republicans, you're all about, local control and getting the federal government out of people's lives and letting the people on the ground in the states actually make these decisions for themselves, self-determination, which we do. We do stand for that. That's federalism at its purest. But when it comes to a majority black and brown city like Washington, D.C., you want to step in and tell them how to run things. So why is that an incorrect argument?
Well, first of all, it's all predicated on this fundamental lie that the claim is that they want D.C. to be a state because they think taxation without representation. It's a nice fairy tale, but that's not actually what they want. They want 2 more senators who are Democrats. If they actually wanted the people of D.C. to have equal federal representation as all the other states, they would just hand that territory back to Maryland. And when you bring that up, you're like, well, why don't you retrocede it to Maryland? Then they'll have 2 senators. Then they'll have all the congressmen they need. Then it'll be fully taken care of. No. We need to be a separate state. Why? Why? I thought you needed representation. I thought that's what we were fundamentally after. And the answer, of course, is really what they're after. All the people who are making these arguments, long-term Democrat power. They don't care about any of the people who live in the district. They just care about using them in order to sustain power for one political
They
party.
clearly don't care about them because otherwise they would do something about the crime that's plaguing their neighborhoods. And let's face it, this really is about party politics. You're 100% right. If they cared about taxation without representation, they would lift taxation. This place would be like Hong Kong on the Potomac. It'd
be like Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, you don't pay federal income tax in Puerto Rico. So do that to Washington D.C. Oh no, we can't do that. Why not?
Vince Coglianese, Daily Caller, and the mighty WMAL. Thanks for joining us on this. There's more to come on O'Connor tonight. You're watching Salem News Channel.